Working on a little storeroom door, and I had to put in a lock set, and I've always kind of hassled with mortising in the latch of a lock set, and so I'm doing an ugly but accurate jig here out of a piece of plywood. Just start by tracing the lock set on. Because I'm using a bushing guided bit, the difference between the edge of the bit and the bushing is a 1/16 of an inch. So I add a 1/16 of an inch around the perimeter of that rectangle. If I've done that rectangle square with a square piece of plywood, I can measure my little mark from the edge of the board to the edge of the blade, between the edge of the blade and my fence, and raise the blade up through the board to cross that line, which is a 1/16 of an inch outside of the rectangle. Here I've even shown you a miss. I missed by probably a 64th, maybe a 32nd, so I just gave the fence a tiny tap and raised the blade a second time in order to get that line right on my little pencil mark. Once I raise that through and get the first mark done, again, this is all pretty much by eye, honestly, but once I've raised that blade through to cross those other two lines, all I need to do is have these lines cross. They can be very ugly because the bushing is a bigger diameter than the width of my saw kerf. Once I've done that, I measure from the edge of the board to the second line, and this time when I measure my blade from the fence, I'm measuring the left-hand side of the blade rather than the right-hand side of the blade, because that's where my saw kerf is going to end up. So I just record that number, move my fence to be that same distance from the left-hand side of the blade, put the plywood back on the table saw up against the fence, and raise the blade through a second time. Again, this isn't like surgery, so as long as it's really close, you're going to get a very nice looking mortise and a very tight fitting latch. And that's really all I'm trying to do. Of course, you can do this with chisels very easily. Of course, you could freehand this with a trim router very easily. But I'm just showing you a way that I do it. Got tons of scrap plywood laying around. And this is an easy, ugly, but accurate way of making a template. So there's the second cut. And then I just rotate the board 90 degrees, measure to that next little pencil mark, raise the blade a third time through there. Again, doesn't matter that the blade over the cuts overlap, doesn't matter a bit. Measure a fourth time to that furthest pencil mark. Again, measure this time to the left-hand side of the blade from the fence. Put the board on one last time and clamp it down, hang on tight, and you get the fourth cut, and you've got what I would call a deadly accurate rectangle that is 1/16 of an inch bigger than the mortise that you want to cut for the latch. Then I simply trace the latch onto the door so that I can eyeball the template 1/16 of an inch outside of all four sides. Again, it's a lot relying on the eyeball, but this isn't super critical. So I set the template down. In this little instance, I'm using double-sided tape. I've set my router bit to be the depth of the plywood, which is 1/2 of an inch, plus the depth of the latch, so that my mortise depth ends up the thickness of the latch. And once I've mortised that out, you'll see that the latch fits in really nice. What I've been left with then are some tiny radiuses in the corners because my bit is round and the latch is square, and so I take a tiny chisel and just chop out those corners. They chop out very easily because they're so small. And you'll see that the latch just fits down in there very tightly and very square. And there's my ugly but accurate latch template. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If so, please subscribe. And thank you for watching.